So the doom and gloom that you see all around you drives me bananas, and it requires a concerted effort to fight against that. And I think a huge, massive amount of why that happens is that, I'm going to blame the news agencies absolutely, but human nature, we like to watch and look at doom and gloom. And, the news agencies and the media folks learned about this in the 1960s and 70s and started reporting on that. And so there has been a concerted effort to focus on the doom and gloom. I want you to sort of think about, the 1940s style of reporting. It was in general, very, very optimistic. And I think as societies, I think that's like, reporting on the negative is good, so we could see these things, but I think we often get so carried away, um, and then we really just go into deep moments in our life, like things that we just shouldn't go into. Um, like I think about things like climate change, for example. Yes, there are massive problems that we're going to experience because of it. Yes, it's real. And we're going to experience all of these massive problems from it. But, but, here's the big but is that there is a large group of people that are actually doing something about it. And politicians, and there's some politicians that are actively, trying to slow it down. There's some individuals that don't believe in it. Um, all of that kind of stuff. It is real. Those are real, but they're not as big if you look at the economic, the changes, massive changes that we're actually making. It's incredible how much we're actually transitioning and going from, things that are not so bright, and to where we are now. Like the last coal plants in England, that is what you represent England with is coal. That's closing, right? And then we're soon transitioning to solar and wind, and the graphs. If you've ever getting a chance to do that, I wish I could sort of show that. Um, if you start looking at it, it's spectacular how quickly these things are actually changing. Norway is primarily, electric at this moment. An entire country that's in the north that is, their whole fleet of automobiles is electric, and that they're sort of selling. China is reached the 50% level. All their cars that are being sold in the market are electric. Like we're really going through this massive transition. Even factories, the amount of scrubbing technology that we've added. Um, if you start looking at the factories from the 1950s to now, in a matter of, I guess, that's 70 years. So let's even go like shorter than that, right? So you go from the 1980s to now, the factories predominantly are way better, right? And there are companies like, Amazon, tech companies and stuff that are making a concerted effort to transition away from dirty energy. And I believe them. I don't think it's just greenwashing with many of these companies because it is taking a concerted effort. So I think like looking at all these things, right? Like, and why do I believe them is that that's part of the conversation today, right? Like that is part of the narrative, the dialogue. That wouldn't have been part of the dialogue in the 1970s. Um, People just wouldn't have talked about it, right? There very little discussion about what was actually going on, and heavy industry was really heavy. It was dirty. And so we're going to say the same thing in 30 years, right? In 30 years, we're going to look back and say, now in the 2020s, we're going to be like, oh my gosh, like what the hell were these guys doing? It was so dirty and terrible. And people don't understand how rapid these things change, right? And there will be a concerted effort, even the places where there is laggards. um, I'm going to tell you, once the southern states, for example, because they're laggards, but actually they're not. If you look at some of the technology adoption that they have, they're pretty remarkable in some of the southern states in terms of how advanced they are in terms of the technology adoption, like solar and EVs and our electric vehicles and things like that. But once we start experiencing, every we're going to have catastrophic events every summer, right? Like that's going to happen. It's going to happen increasing amount. Well, it's just going to be economically expensive to keep doing the things that we're doing, right? And there will be more concerted effort, particularly as lobbying groups for the oil and gas lobbying groups kind of die out because they're just not economically prosperous anymore, like cigarettes, right? Like it's hard to find anybody doing that stuff. And so, um, there's people that still smoke, obviously, but it's getting harder and harder. But, but, all of this stuff is amazing, and there's all these transitions that are happening. And so that's where I want us to, coming back to the conversation is like, don't get caught up in the doom and gloom of it all. It is foreboding, right? There is a lot. When I say like there's going to be catastrophic events, it's going to be pretty bad. Um, and it's probably going to be one of the sort of number one causes of catastrophe across the world. But at the same time, we're making a concerted effort to change this. And you would be surprised in the matter of 20, 30 years, right? Like, I want you to think about 20 years ago, were people even considering electric cars? Now, there was a movie that was a documentary that was really famous. It was called Who Killed the Electric Car, right? That was in the 1990s, mid 1990s. That came out, probably late 1990s. And now we're 20 years later and look at all the transition that we've had. Like there's massive change on the way. So even things that you might think about, like sucking CO2 out of the air, for example, and really getting that down, um, to really change some of that stuff. I think we're close. Like in 20 years, there may be something that there is a viable solution where people are actually doing that and it's economically viable. Um, and on top of it, like there may be a whole bunch of other solutions that are happening. Yes, there is. If you pick your thing, there is going to be a lot of like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that's happening. That's so like scary. And if you pick your thing, anything, like you pick your big, I don't know, urbanization, right? Like, so, oh my God, there's too much of that going on. Like nuclear weapons. Oh my gosh, it's like kind of scary, like very scary. Like all of these things, are real threats. I'm not downplaying any of them, but I believe strongly in the power of humanity. I believe strongly in the power of us changing things around and doing good things. And it requires us to have this sort of view of like, hey, we could do this, right? And if there isn't a spot, right, you are looking at this right now. And I hope somebody listens to this and gets inspired one day, right? Maybe it's you. You're listening to this and in your country, maybe you're in Iran right now and you're listening to this, or Argentina and you're listening to this. And you're like, my country doesn't do this. It's freaking out. You be the solution. You go out and actually make that change. And, you know, you be the person that actually does it, right? You stand up, put your hand up and make that change, right? And that's a super hard thing to do. Um, you need to be the one that does it, right? You need to recognize the world as it is instead of being cynical, right? Which I love cynics. I get it. Many times I'm a cynic, but get up and change it. You be the solution. And nobody's going to believe you. It's going to be hard. Um, the whole thing is a mess. You're going to look stupid. You're going to feel stupid. You're going to, all of those things. You're not going to know what you're doing. And yet this is how you change it. You get up and you do it. And you have that optimistic attitude that I could do this. And you just get up every single day. I'm going to try this. I'm going to get going. I'm going to make this change in my life and in other people's lives. And yes, a high chance of it failing, but I'm not going to stop. And I'm going to make this thing happen. That's it. Have that can-do attitude, man, you could do a lot. And with all of the available tools that we have today that we didn't have 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or 30 years ago, and you can just change the world. It just requires you to start. All right, take care and have a wonderful